Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Planning Committee of the 22nd of October 2025. The first item on the agenda, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? Councillor Bowen?
Councillor Price is subbing for Mark Jones. Councillor Jones. Yeah. I'm acting as Vice Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Campbell?
I am subbing for someone, but I'm not sure who. Sorry?
Councillor Field.
Oh, yes, Councillor Field. Yes, I knew that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other apologies? No, right. Item 2 is the record of the meeting held on the 24th of September 2025, along with the update and the supplementary agenda agreed. Great, thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, I can confirm that there are no late items which do not appear on the main agenda. Item 4, do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests or other significant interests? Councillor Etheridge?
My usual statement, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell?
So I work for Nashaba Khan, Member of Parliament for Gillingham and Rainham. I know that some of these agenda items, constituents have written into the office with concerns, and I know Nashaba herself has been involved with and had some conversations and correspondence about it. I don't actually deal with casework and individual cases like that, so I'm not aware of the content of those conversations and emails and correspondence. So I don't have any other information except what's in front of me. I've also noticed that on agenda item, I believe, 8, I have met with the applicant briefly and his brother through my work for Nashaba. Nothing to do with this case or these developer plans, just through the normal functioning of the operation and engaging with business holders in Gillingham on a very social level.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations? No, I'd also like to say for agenda item 8, I know the applicant from years ago, my younger days, but apart from being friends on Facebook, we don't have any contact at all, just putting that out there to say, and we certainly haven't discussed the application in the agenda. Thank you. So now moving on to agenda, before moving on to the main agenda, is it agreed by members that ward member Councillor Llewellyn Prenter speaks for agenda items 6, 7 and 8? Is that agreed? Thank you. So then moving on to the first planning application, agenda item 5, which is the planning application for 42 Melbourne Road. Senior planner Jackie Olsen will be presenting this application. So over to you, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. This application is for a change of use from C3 dwelling house to C2 children's care home at 42 Malvern Road in Gillingham. The home would be for 2 children between the ages of 7 and 17, with up to 3 adult carers and a manager. You can see the application site here outlined in red, and just a bit of context. Where's my mouse? You can see the A2 Watling Street running along sort of bottom. Can't see how my mouse is working. Oh, there we are. Brilliant. So yeah, here's the A2 here. With obviously there's the new Sainsbury's, another retail and bus links. The application site, Malvern Road, this is in Gillingham Park Conservation Area. So you can see the property here, the front of the dwelling. It's a 2-storey dwelling house with accommodation in the loft space and also a basement. The street scene is made up of uniform Edwardian semi-detached properties, and you can see there's on-street parking here with no restrictions, and this is the back garden of the property. It's important to say this application does not propose any external changes to the property. So you can see here the existing layout. The property is a 6-bedroom property at the moment. You can see the bedrooms here, and then this is the living space with this small kitchen here. This shows the proposed layout. This layout follows a previous application for 4 children to reside at the property with 3 members of staff, which was withdrawn after officers had concerns about the intensity of the use and adequate communal space for the 4 children. This layout for 2 children is considered to provide a higher level of space, more akin to a family home. You can see the larger kitchen dining room at the back here, and then another living room area for the children, with an office and staff room here. So these would be the bedrooms, 2 for the children and 1 for the member of staff, with another space in the loft as a sort of social space, but could be flexible, so it could be like a reading room or space for the staff to put their belongings. There's no parking proposed as part of the development, although there is on-street parking available, and the application is considered to be in a sustainable location close to facilities and public transport. The applicant has also proposed reimbursements on travel expenses for staff using public transport in order to incentivise non-car travel. A condition has been recommended for a travel management plan to show how this scheme would be implemented. And a condition is also recommended for cycle storage to be provided for staff and residents in the garden area. So therefore, subject to these conditions, the proposal is considered to be acceptable and the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Jackie. I now open the floor to members. Any members? No. Councillor Goldvin?
Well, I might as well make a start. So we all know that there is a shortage of suitable care provision for young people here in Medway. In fact, there's, it's not just Medway, there's a national shortage, and the staffing ratio that we see in the report is quite an eye-opener of how the costs are likely to be for us or any other local authority that uses this facility. I don't think that the disturbance from the proposed use will be any more, or worse, it could even be better than had that property been occupied as a family home. So I think the need is there. The house is a nice size. I mean, the only criticism I've got looking at the photos of the back garden, it'd be nice if there was a little bit softer area for children to play on than just the slabs there. But apart from that minor point, I see no reason at all why we should not approve this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Goldvin. Any other member? No. Councillor Hammond-Eshay.
Thank you very much. My only concerns, well, I've got quite a few really. One of which I've said many times is the proliferation of children's homes or adaptations into children's homes within Medway. I think it's way too excessive. Yes, there is a need. We do recognise there's a need, but also looking at the acuity of the individuals that are going to be cared for, we're talking about three staff members. And there's no plan, and I know within the planning guidelines we cannot ask for the support plan for these individuals. But there's something that needs to be said on record, that there needs to be a plan for these young people to have the least invasive interventions. So how long will these young people have 3 members of staff watching them? Is it for an indefinite period of time? Because if their business model for these care homes requires that level of I would say, rigorous intervention, and anyone that has been under observation knows how intrusive it is. It's not a nice thing. So if the business model is wrapped around 3 members of staff watching you every single day, yes, there's an acuity nature to it, but we as responsible custodians, should I say, should be looking at what are you doing to empower that person to go from 3 to 2 to 1. Opposed to having a business model that says you're always going to have 3 members of staff watching you forever, because that's the business model that wraps around that we're giving these provisions to. So as a planning, I find it really hard to dispute the plan application. It's just these are my reservations that need to be expressed to the committee, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to come in, Jackie? Cheers.
Oh, I don't think.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay. Any other member? Councillor Campbell.
So I had a question about the traffic management plan. It does mention in the report that although at some level you don't consider this to have more of a detrimental effect on the parking situation than, say, a household with 6 bedrooms, but you have acknowledged in the report that there will be a changeover of staff at various points and there'll be other visitors coming and going. So it seems to me that there will be a more significant impact than that. I mean, honestly, but that seems like not a strong enough objection to something as critical as a children's home being needed. However, when you say that there is nothing enforceable that can be done, I mean, I think in one place it says that the condition is that the agency will make clear that parking is not permitted for their staff, and at other places you're talking about disincentivizing and incentivizing. So I just wanted clarification on that. Is there nothing enforceable that can be put in place so that you don't have the staff members who are there regularly parking on those streets? Because, I mean, as a neighbor, I can imagine how that might be. If I'm a neighbor, that might be quite a problem. And you don't want these children to be affected by negativity around things like that. It's a hard enough life that they're going to be in care. You don't want neighbors to be creating problems because their setting causes extra parking issues.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, did you have any comment on that?
Yeah, just to come back on that, there is parking pressure on those streets there, and it's known. So I think that's why the applicant was willing to say that people wouldn't be able to drive to work. But obviously, from a sort of planning point of view, that's not very easy to enforce. So in terms of what we've looked at doing is a travel plan that then encourages them to use sustainable means of transport, and that would be giving incentives such as reimbursement of travel fares. So I think that's where we sort of sit. Obviously, there'll be encouragement for them to be able to use sustainable travel for work, but we can't restrict that as such, that they use the car, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Campbell, did you want to come back in?
So yes, that's exactly my point. Can we not place a condition on it in such a way that it is enforceable?
Did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. We can't put a condition on saying no one can drive to work. That wouldn't be a reasonable condition to impose. There may be all manners of reasons why people need to drive. Maybe due to sort of health conditions themselves. So we can't put an unreasonable restriction on through the planning process. So what, as Ms. Olsen outlined, what we're looking to do is to use the encouragement of sustainable modes of transport through the travel plan, which would be an enforceable condition insofar as we can say, well, this is the travel plan that you've submitted. Are you doing this? Are you doing all you can to ensure that that the workers are travelling by sustainable modes of transport? So that would be enforceable. But as I say, we can't have a blanket ban saying that people can't drive to work. And I think when you compare that, as Ms. Olsen alluded to earlier, to the fact that it is a 6-bedroom house, which is likely to generate a number of traffic movements and parking pressures in a C3 use residential dwelling, then this application gives us the opportunity to try and control that a bit more, which we're doing through the negotiation with the applicant and the attachment of the condition. So I think we're doing all we can through the planning process. It wouldn't be reasonable to go any further, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? No. Yeah, Councillor Campbell, I understand your comments about the parking and where you're coming from, but I think, yeah, as Pete said, if it's anything like my house we have with my children where we all drive, you know, that a 6-bedroom house could have 6 cars in it realistically, so at least it's the changeover will be for a short time when there will be pressure on the parking. So I've also got to read out this short statement when it comes to children's homes, which is basically where the committee approves planning permission for children's care homes, the approval relates only to planning terms. We're looking at planning terms. The permission for the children's care home to operate is granted by Ofsted. I now move over to Vice Chair, Councillor Bowen. Thank you.
The committee recommends approval of the application with conditions 1 to 6.
Okay. Thank you. Those for the... Oh, sorry, is that seconded? Thank you. Those for the application.
That's 15, Chair.
The application is therefore approved. So now moving to the next agenda item 6, which is planning application for 31 Stafford Street. Senior Planner Sam Pilbeam will be presenting this application, so over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks part retrospective planning permission for the demolition of a rear conservatory, construction of a single-storey side and rear extension to the first floor existing rear return, and installation of a rear dormer in order to facilitate the change of use of the dwelling into a 7-person, 7-bedroom HMO. The application site is located within the urban area of Gillingham. You've got the Great Lunch Heritage Park to the west, and approximately 400 metres to the northeast, you have Gillingham Station and the mouth of Gillingham High Street. Looking slightly closer at the immediate site context, you can see the encompassing localities formed of a fine, dense, urban grain-formed development, characterised by tightly woven, narrow residential terrace plots standing at 2 stories in height, some of which have lower ground floor basements as well. Turning attention to the parking in the area as well, as you can see, there's very limited off-street parking, with the majority of parking being accommodated on the street. However, the area is subject to a car parking management zone, is within a car parking management zone, sorry. Therefore, any future occupants would be required to acquire a permit accordingly. Dropping into the street scene, we can see the existing property here within the navy blue. As you can tell by the rubbish bags and skip outside works have commenced. However, much of these works are against the formally granted LDC on the site, which was approved in August this year. And then we've got the existing side and rear. In particular, I draw members' attention to the rear elevation. And apologies, I can't quite see from this angle, but there's a sort of window here, and that's where the proposed rear extension on the applicant property would abut onto. And then down behind this brick wall is where their rear garden is located. Moving on to the existing elevations, as I said, there's no proposed change on the front. And then to the rear, we see this sort of undulating downwards of that rear return and that conservatory that's proposed to be removed. And then on to existing floor plans, as you can see, the property has a basement on the lower ground floor, an open-plan living dining area to the front of the ground floor, and then to the rear floor, we have a kitchen and bathroom, and a total of 3 bedrooms on the first floor. Here are the approved elevations of the formally granted LDC. So we can see the installation of the rear dormer, as well as this infill extension here. The proposal was also granted approval under Class L of the GDPO for the provision of a conversion to a 6-bedroom HMO. And then looking at the proposed elevations, you can see this dormer and infill extension remain identical, and then you have this bricks and mortar rear extension along with the extension to the first floor level, which, as I said, abuts that adjoining property. So I should emphasize as well that internally we've got a 8.5 square meter shared kitchen and dining area on the lower ground floor, 3 bedrooms on the first floor, 2 ensuite and 1 off-suite, and an additional communal area and lobby into the rear garden, a further 3 bedrooms on the first floor, and a final off-suite bedroom within the roofscape. All of the bedrooms either meet or significantly exceed the standards set out within the MPPG, and are likewise afforded sufficient degrees of light and outlook. As such, when taking into account their larger sizes of the bedrooms, it's considered that a level of shared communal space provided would be sufficient for the functionality of the dwelling as a 7-person, 7-bedroom HMO. Lastly, looking at the density of HMOs within proximity to the site, these plans illustrate the existing land uses. For context, the land uses have been taken off public access and from the HMO register, which are both published online, finding that the predominant land use is in single house occupancy with some sporadic flats, subdivisions of flats as well. Within the context of this plan, of the thresholds of this plan, there are no existing HMOs. Obviously, the application site has an outstanding lawful development certificate. As such, there's no concerns in relation to proliferation of HMOs within this area. And overall, it's considered that the property would not increase the levels of overlooking going above and beyond what would be expected within a highly dense area such as this, or going above and beyond that within the approved lawful development certificate, nor is it viewed that the property would result in volumes of noise and disturbance that would unduly prejudice residential amenity, particularly again when considering the previously approved Class L permitted development under the GDPO. Therefore, the proposal is recommended for approval, subject to conditions securing cycle storage and refuse storage details, limiting the number of occupants at 7 at any one time, and also securing a car parking management plan, which would detail that future occupants, how future occupants are obtained from securing parking permits on the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now move over to Ward Member Councillor Luella Prenta, who has 5 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing me to speak. I'll start off by saying the rate and scale of HMOs in Gillingham is rapidly growing. Although Gillingham is an urban area, it does not mean that residents who already live there deserve or want to have overdevelopment with more and more people living on top of each other. This creates its own issues, and those councillors here who represent central urban areas within our towns will understand the nature of the problems this generates from their own casework. Family homes in the area are being replaced with HMOs, and although seemingly answering the need for single person or couple accommodation, it is removing much needed affordable houses for families to buy or rent, pushing up the cost of renting for those houses that remain. We're told that this accommodation will be occupied by students and professionals, yet then surely the properties such as this, better use for additional space within the property, could be for a communal area, a proper communal area, like students would have in student halls. Living in one room with no other space can have a negative impact, as we know, on mental health of those tenants who occupy them. Students in halls only have to live in accommodation for part of the year, yet we're expecting adults to live in these one rooms full time. Even if there is an alleged sufficient space for this number of adults to live, and let's face it, rooms in HMOs do sometimes have more than one person in them, 2 people could be living, so 14 adults living in this one house who could all potentially have a car. The area is already at maximum occupation in terms of population and vehicles, and approving this application just adds to the problem. All occupants will no doubt have visitors from time to time, and are we really suggesting none of those visitors will use a car? You may say, oh well, they already have permission for 6 accommodations within this house, but are we really going to condone more and more and more? Imagine if you lived next door. So residents have asked me, they've contacted me and said to me, imagine if you live next door to this property, and I mean literally next door, the other side of the wall that is shared, to potentially 14 adults, plus visitors walking up and down stairs at any hours of the day because they could be working shifts, not to mention the general noise generated from that number of people. Even if it's just the 7 adults, all separate and living independently of each other, this will have a negative effect on the neighbouring occupants in terms of noise alone. I've been contacted by the residents who've said even the fact that the retrospective works have already started shows contempt for the process. And it's caused them to complain to me, both in person at my street surgery as well as by email and telephone. Now, in terms of refuse storage, there appears to be a place for refuse storage at the rear garden. However, it's not clear how the refuse is to be taken out, because there does not seem to be rear access to the street to allow this. So in reality, the refuse will be presumably taken from the basement kitchen, and it's likely to be placed outside the front of the property, only to be blown around the streets like we've seen before. Across the road from this property is already a well-known fly tipping hotspot, which costs the Medway taxpayer every time it needs to be cleared. It's issues such as this that negatively affect the area. This property should have an appropriate waste management plan. There are good landlords and services that employ the services of someone who comes and takes responsibility to organise their waste appropriately to reduce the impact on others. If we were talking about a block of flats here, it would be a requirement. The residents of the road have written to us and met us as ward councillors to express their concerns and the excessive stress the development's having on their life. They feel the noise, and with one family in particular, the reduction in light to their home as a result of this development will reduce the quality of life. Concerns have also been raised about the build and a potential gully that will allow rainwater to seep down and cause damage to their property. Other residents have stated they feel the number of accommodations is actually 9 and not 7 as stated, and that the impact will negatively affect the impact on solar panels on their property. Now, the report mentions, and the officer's just said, it's just, it could potentially is just another resident, and there is a limited number of HMOs within a certain distance of this site. However, a feasibility study undertaken this year and shared with Cabinet last night shows that in this ward, there are more than double the number of hidden HMOs that we have on record. Consideration also needs to include the Saxon Street opposite, as that is a close proximity to this property and also has HMOs that will impact this property. I mean, how many times are we going to keep saying another one? If you had another 50, that's another 50 people, another 50 cars. There is a place for HMOs in Medway. However, we're not going to fix the housing crisis by ongoing losses of family homes, overdevelopment of HMOs, and the negative impact with noise and extra pressures on parking.
Thank you, Councillor Llewellyn-Prenter. Now open the floor to members. Any members? Councillor Gilbourne.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something I don't like to see, but reading the officer's report and recommendations, because it meets all the policies that the council already has, I can't see a reason to turn it down. And if we did, I'm sure on appeal it would be overturned. And so, like I say, I don't really like it because it does seem a particular concentration on that corner in such a densely populated area already, but that isn't a planning reason for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galvin.
Well, there has to be a large demand for this type of accommodation, otherwise the people providing it wouldn't do it. And the reason I believe is there are a lot of particularly young people who need some cheap and cheerful accommodation. If you're an ambitious young person and want eventually to have your own home, there's no way that you can afford to rent a half-decent place, because that would take up all of your money that you're saving for the deposit. So there is a need for the cheaper accommodation. This house could very easily be occupied by a family with 3, 4, 5 teenagers. That, I would say, would probably generate far more noise than having 6 or so adults in the place. I think we are treading on a little bit of dangerous territory by demonising people who need to live in this sort of accommodation. We shouldn't be demonising them. We should be providing what society needs, and there is a need for this cheaper accommodation. It will always exist in town centres, in the older Victorian and Edwardian type of house. I think if we say, no, I can't see, we're going to be letting a lot of particularly young people down who need this accommodation. We, need to provide a full range of accommodation. And, if they don't have this sort of cheaper accommodation, where are the people who are at the moment sofa surfing when they're going to go? Somebody who's sofa surfing and then gets a reasonable job, they could move up to this, and then other people will move up from this once they've saved their deposit and probably into their first time of owner occupation. So, personally, I think, yes, we've got to accept that there's going to be some disturbance, but there always is. But I think to demonise people who are living in bedsits is not the right approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Filmer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm always interested in what the ward councillor says about things like this, because they're the people who've got the residents talking to them, and the case you've put regarding why they don't want it and the problems it will cause, totally agree with you. It's a weird thing about these HMOs, and I understand the need for them, but I also understand that we need to be careful that we don't have too many in one area. So as far as I'm concerned, if we can prove there's too many in that area, I'm quite happy to back you on that regarding the planning.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with you, and also agree to a certain extent with you, Councillor Golvin, but at the end of the day, we're not saying not to have this as an HMO. Without planning permission, you can have up to 6 people. This is 7 rooms, and how long do we keep accepting more and more with people living in these cramped conditions? Councillor Hammond-Eshay.
Thank you very much. And for this one, I agree with my colleague, the ward councillor there. Not only does she have the information on hand from residents, I too, as a councillor in Gillingham North, I've received, even to this day, concerns from residents complaining about people leaving the area because of the proliferation of HMOs. So people that have been living in the area for long periods of time, 20, 30 years, leaving to make way for, because they cannot deal with the noise, the rubbish, and all the stuff that goes with the HMOs. I don't think we're demonizing HMOs, but when you've got residential areas, they're not equipped for the influx of HMOs within the area. They're not built for it in mind. My concerns are twofold, in fact. One is the accuracy of this plan that you have here, the land use plan, because there's other which is green, there's no green at all. There's apparently no HMOs, but I know in hand that there are unregistered HMOs within close proximity to these roads, and I highly suspect there are unregistered HMOs on those streets already. So I'm concerned. Obviously, one of the residents that already put a concern around going from 7 to 9 people in there. The second question is to Sam regarding ensuring there can only be 7 people at one time within the property. Now, that could be interpreted in many ways. If you look at our boroughs in central London, you find people time-sharing their accommodation. 7 people could be 14, because as one goes out for night shift, somebody comes in. Okay, so what do you mean by 7 at any one time? That needs to be really clarified and ratified as to what that really means for us. And obviously, I need to get some more detail around this plan here, because I do know, and I'm getting these concerns to me daily for people leaving the area. And what we do not want to do is change the vibe and the balance of people that have been living in Medway most of their lives to make way for 6 or 7 people that are coming into the area. I don't think that's the right thing to do at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a question? Yes. Sam, did you want to come in on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. So in answer to your question, maybe I was a bit too loose in terms of my presentation and saying 7 people at any one time. The condition would be worded insofar as to say only 7 residents at any one time. And I think that tightens it up quite significantly in that sense. So it'd be registered residents as the HMO. So if you're saying someone can occupy it during the daytime and someone can occupy it at the night time, that still counts as 2 residents, and therefore you can't exceed that number of 7. So in terms of what you say about unregistered HMOs, I'd struggle to comment in terms of that. I mean, I can't put them on the plan if they're unregistered. However, I did use the HMO register, which looks at HMOs starting from free residents upwards. So there's no HMOs of 3 residents or more according to our HMO register, which was updated, I think it was March this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell?
Thank you. I actually wanted to speak to what Councillor Galvin said. It's not a question of demonising the people who live in bedsits. Nobody does. I've lived in a tiny, tiny room in a house as a university student, then in a house share outside of the campus, and until I could, make my way up, being able to rent a place by myself. So I've done that. I've done that journey, and I know what you mean. People need to have access to what they can afford at different stages in their life. It's not a question of demonizing them. It's a question of demonizing almost a predatory environment where accommodation that is just not conducive to healthy, wholesome living conditions is allowed to proliferate because people can do that, and there is some profit to be made out of that. And I think that is the problem here. So, I've looked at the plans, and you seem to have a guideline as to what room sizes should be. I'm still just trying to think how adults can live in that much of a tiny room and not have like any other recreational area that they can have access to, how you can spend your days there without how that can be any kind of healthy environment. There's no communal space other than just the kitchen, which is just, you just pass through to make meals and wash clothes and dishes. I'm also looking at the aerial view on Google Maps, and the outdoor area seems already quite restricted. So with the changes further, that's going to take away more of that space. So, and for that many people to have that much limited outdoor space, and I hadn't even considered what Councillor Prentice said about the refuse and how that would be managed. That's within the actual plans. There's a wider point to be made about community cohesion that I worry about. I've lived next door to places which are HMOs, and I think it's not easy for people who are in HMOs, like such high density HMOs, to feel welcomed and included in the local neighborhood. I think we have to consider the wider implications of this. I understand the planning limitations here. You have to go with the policy, but I'm just concerned about the wider implications. It really seriously brings into question community cohesion and relationships between neighbors and things like that. So yeah, I really have, it just seems like a tiny house to pack in a lot of people into. That's how it looks like to me from the plans. And that's not just going to be to the detriment of the people who are living in there, who don't know any of this. They will just find the accommodation that they can afford and they'll move in. And then it'll also be to the detriment of the community in that area as well. That's my feeling.
Thank you. Councillor Anang?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow on from what my sister said, with my other colleague said, from the other side said, with regards to community cohesion. Basically, I believe having too many HMOs in one area can have an effect on community balance. I've stayed in an area where we have an HMO very close to my house, whereby it's not people staying there always, but always you see that within a month you see different people coming and going. Though it's an HMO, but it's not being used by one person or two person, but people come in for maybe 3 weeks, 2 months, 5 months, and they move out. So with that, there is if you want to ensure community cohesion, you want to see people you know within your area, but you see that always, every time there are people moving in and moving out, because that's the reason most of them are being, though it's being built for people to stay in, but it tends to be people moving in and people coming in. So I think it can affect community balance within an area. So we should take a critical look at number of HMOs within a particular area. I don't know if maybe there is any threshold that the council have that, okay, within this particular area, there shouldn't be more than 10% of HMOs around a specific radius, because we have to start taking that into consideration if there is no such a threshold. Because if we try to concentrate all the HMOs in particular areas, then that area will lose their community value because people will come in and move. But within an area, we expect to be, you expect to know people that you live with. But if every time you see new people coming in and going out, I think it does affect that community in particular. So I would like to know if we have any threshold for number of HMOs that can be within a specific radius within the council plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Did,
Chair, I'm happy to come back to you, but is there any other members?
yeah, there is. If we go to Councillor Galvin next.
Yes, I'd like to come back because there's some factual things that are in the report that are being denied here. I mean, if I've read the report correctly, for this proposed HMO, all of the rooms exceed, and some by quite a large margin, the space standards. So saying that people are going to be stuck in small rooms does not stack up. I've got the plan in front of me, and there is, for this one, there is 3 spaces on the floor marked as communal spaces. So there are spaces for people to congregate and move. And I'm sorry I have to say, you are demonising the potential residents by saying they would not be good neighbours, that they would be noisy, that they would litter, leave rubbish and not be good people to have it in the locality. None of that, I believe, would stand one moment if...
Don't believe I said any of those things. And I specifically said they cannot be demonized. They are taking the opportunities that are presented to them within their circumstances. I accept the point about the communal spaces. I was confused with another case if there are, but I don't believe I said any of those things about demonizing them.
You said small spaces, unless my hearing's completely
Yes,
off.
and I specifically said the report is going by the guidelines of what spaces are and in comparison to them. However, my opinion is that in spite of that, these spaces are not large enough to be conducive to healthy living. I made that very clear. I'm not questioning the guidelines here. I'm saying that that still does not make it valid.
So rooms that exceed, in your opinion,
there's
rooms that exceed the limits
just...
are too small. I mean, that will just not stand up at a planning inquiry.
Okay, Councillor
A
Galvin.
good lawyer would take us to the cleaners.
Right, Councillor Galvin, have you finished?
Well, I do find this very, very difficult to understand, particularly from socialists who pretend to be for the poorer people in society. And what you're doing here this evening is denying people of limited means good, decent standard accommodation.
Okay.
Okay, this is complete misrepresentation of what I have said, complete misrepresentation of what any of what we have said on this side is, okay? And just making some kind of extremely tenuous and kind of ridiculous political point, it's not helping your planning considerations that you're trying to uphold. I was very clear in what I said. Let's not demonize these people. I was also very clear in saying that I understand by the framework that the report is created, that the room sizes may be appropriate. However, those are not great situations. And I also said I have lived in these conditions. To bring socialism into that is utterly ridiculous. Socialism, interestingly for you, Councillor, stands for protecting people from exploitative conditions, protecting people from conditions which are detrimental to their health and advantage. And I don't see any conflict here. Not that I was trying to bring my socialism into here. Can we just stick to the point, please, in this committee about the report? I'd be really grateful if you could stick to the point and address what I have said rather than imagine things that I haven't even said.
Okay, let's carry on with the committee now, please. If we move over to Councillor Bowen.
Yeah, Chairman, I want to come in here because, I've sat here for an hour now and all I've heard is bickering and opinions and nothing about the report coming from an officer and a question associated with the report. So I've heard opinions, comments, this is about planning, can I ask this? Can we just stop all this and just say, I have a planning question for the officer, get it answered and move on? We've wasted an hour on this.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. Okay, can we just move on now, please? And we'll move over to Councillor Bowen. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm not happy about approving this. I will, because there's no planning reason not to, but I don't think this is a decent way for people to live. I agree with Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. Any other member? No. Dave, Pete, Dave.
Chair, if I can come in, if that's okay. Sorry, Pete. Yeah, Chair, if I can come in. And I've heard the debate and I've heard the discussion. And I think the point that Councillor Prenter made right at the beginning is that there is an importance and a role to play for HMOs, particularly in town centres. Many of my officers have been or are in HMOs, in shared accommodation. And the location of this is quite close to our universities, and we want to encourage our universities and our students. And we know, as Councillor Campbell says, that students in their first year are often in university accommodation, but then after that they go out into the community, often in shared accommodation. We're also very close to the hospital, and we know that there are a lot of important hospital staff who can only afford small accommodation. So there is an absolute need for this accommodation in Medway and in our town centres. What we have tried to do through our policies is to make sure that when they require planning permission, which this does because it's more than 6 people, that we have control over the standard of accommodation internally, and we have those internal room sizes. And I appreciate the point that Councillor Campbell has made, that in the past there probably were some HMOs, and there may be some HMOs which don't require planning permission, where the room sizes don't meet these standards. But when they require planning permission, we can make sure it meets our standards. And I have taken members relatively recently around a number of HMOs in the Gillingham area to show them the quality of accommodation that can be achieved. And I think members were quite impressed by what they saw. But Councillor Campbell's also made a good point, which is people shouldn't be just remaining in their bedroom and have to live their whole lives in there. That's not a good environment for them from a mental health point of view, which is why emerging policy requires communal spaces to be provided. And on this proposal, we're satisfied with the large kitchen at the lower basement level and with that communal area at the ground floor, that there is sufficient communal space where they can come out their bedrooms, they can have something to eat, they can watch TV, they can engage with their fellow residents there and form those bonds. I do understand the point about maybe it's a small garden. Again, we've looked at that and we feel it's of sufficient size for this form of accommodation. I think I'll draw members' attention to page 39, where it sets out the criteria for both policy H7 of the existing local plan and also T8 of the emerging local plan. And I think the nub of the issue here is, is there an over-proliferation of HMOs in this immediate area? So I'm not talking about the whole of Medway. I do understand the concerns, but in this immediate area, as shown on the plan here that Sam showed, is there an over-proliferation of them? Because we do have to protect family homes. Now, from that plan and from Sam's research, we can't show that. Now, I appreciate that some residents have spoken to Councillor Prenter and have spoken to Councillor Hamandishi and suggested that there are hidden HMOs. We haven't any evidence of that, but if members do feel that the information may not be accurate, then I would suggest going for a deferral. But otherwise, this proposal accords with our planning policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask a question with regards to the waste? Like the bins are in the back garden, how does that get out to the front? Is there rear access?
Chair, I think that's a good point. What we could do in relation to that, we've got condition 6, which talks about requiring the refuse facilities as shown on the plan. So it provides those refuse facilities in the back. And I think the concern there very well explained by Councillor Prenter, was how does it get from the back to the front? Will residents just put it out the front? And therefore, maybe we can amend that condition. Members are minded to approve, amend that condition to have a refuse management strategy as part of that, so that we can have something to enforce there which enables them to take it out on bin days, but when it's not bin days, they have to store it in the back.
Thank you. Is there rear access, do we know?
I don't believe there is rear access. There's a garage to the rear, but there's not rear access.
Okay. So if we can add that as a condition then with what you spoke about, please, Dave. How big is the garden? For, the community garden, Pete, do you want to come in on that?
The garden's a minimum length of 10.5 metres with a sort of maximum length of 18 metres. So where it's at the sort of alley or the patio area next to the access to the garden, it's 18 metres, but as I say, at its shortest, it's 10.5.
And
which our standards require a minimum of 7.
And that is once the extension's been built, that's
Correct.
what's left?
Correct.
And what percentage does that extension take up of the back garden? I know I should have asked this before. Because I'm also interested to know what the square footage is of the property before the extensions, but I know that you won't have that information either.
I'll see what I can find out.
I like putting you on the spot.
Do you want to respond on that, then? I'll see what I can do on there.
Chair, am I permitted to make a comment?
Unfortunately, you can't.
And there are 4.
Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to pull that together in quick enough time, Councillor Stamp. So,
Sorry, apologies. No, that's fine. I understand. Does anyone want to defer this application to see if we can get better information of what the other properties are in this street? Agree?
I think Councillor Peake wants to speak.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Peake.
Thank you. I was mumbling to myself like I often do, because at least I listen to myself. I was going to say that I do not want... So if we're going to defer, there's no need. But the reason, I wonder the rationale is, to me, I don't want to base a decision like this on assumptions. We're assuming the type of people that are going to live there, they're going to be students, that's an assumption. And we didn't seem to have enough data about whether there isn't too many HMOs. So that's why the deference, I think, is a good idea. Because even though we just had an answer, it's where they are. Could that, to me, is presumably a legitimate reason, that's the question, I suppose, to turn something down if we determine there's too many HMOs, is that correct?
Chair, just on that question, I've not made any assumption in terms of who would occupy them, in terms of whether it's students as well. What I've said is that there is a demand for HMOs in the area, and part of the reason for that is the demand from the students, and we want to have the students come in here. We want them to stay in Medway after that, but I'm not saying that these will necessarily be for students, but also young professionals, as Councillor Gelvin says. I've had, in relatively recent times, 3 members of my staff who have been in shared accommodation, and that's relatively recently. And then we've got the hospital. So I'm just giving an idea as to the demand for it. So I wasn't making any assumptions. But I think, taking your second point, Councillor Peake, which is the fundamental issue here that I've heard, planning issue that I've heard today, is in relation to the proliferation. And if members don't feel that the evidence that we've presented is sufficiently accurate and want us to do more work, then that's a reason to defer, because that's where the balance of this application lies, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to hear that, because I'm going to say this before, that we've had occasions where emotionally we don't really want to approve something, and I get that, and I get the reasons why, but in planning, it does have to be based on fact. And I was concerned with the way the conversation was going. We're doing it on assumptions. We're not actually doing it based upon evidence, so I'm glad we're going to, well, we haven't decided yet. I'll be voting for deferral anyway.
They didn't actually have much time to get the information together either, because it was only at Chair's briefing last night that I mentioned about having this, so it was, yeah. So those four, oh sorry, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, just in terms of the density, I would like to see that it's at least a 500 metre diameter, that we do a proper analysis of the HMO density in a reasonable area, not just in the street and the neighbouring street.
Right, thank you. Okay, so those for deferral of the application.
That's 13, Chair.
The application is therefore deferred. We're going to have the same situation, I believe, on the next two applications, because there's maps for that.
Chair, can
That's why I'm bringing it up
defer
now.
those as well and come back with the right information, and then we could vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's that, defer both of the next applications, is that? Agreed? Yeah, so is it agreed that the other two are deferred? Sorry, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, so if we are deferring them, I would like to see a decent amount, diameter in terms of the analysis, and I'd also like to know how many unregistered HMOs, if possible, are in the area as well. So a thorough analysis before we come back and consider these planning applications.
Yeah, okay. Right.
Sorry, Chair, thank you for that, and that's really clear, and I'm happy to defer all three applications. And I think the point is, as Councillor Prentice said, it's the hidden HMOs that we need to find a way of finding out that. But what I would just ask, what I don't want to do, is to do all that work and come back and for members to refuse them on another ground. So if in relation to either of the next two applications, be it Kingswood or Franklin, you've got other concerns other than that proliferation, you want more information on that, then I think it'd be useful to hear that now. I'm looking at the legal officer. Do you think that's fair? Sorry, Chair, I just think if we could go to Kingswood, and if members say we want this deferred because we want this information, if they've got other concerns regarding Kingswood, I'd like to hear that now rather than having that debate later.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll move on to, well, agenda item 6, that's deferred. So now we'll move on to agenda item 7, planning application for 3 Kingswood Road. Senior Planner Sam Pilburn will be presenting this application, so over to you, Sam.
Sorry, I just got a concern that it's far better that you meet the criteria for a robust discussion when you've met all the right standards than having discussion and the committee have to hold on to the view and wait for the plans to come back and then combine those two together. I personally would prefer to do everything at once than review something now and not even vote on it. I think as a collective, as a pack that we get served to appraise, everything has to be right and exact for scrutiny, not partially correct, then we scrutinize. It's a bit confusing for me, sorry.
Chair, and I really do understand that point. And I appreciate you don't want to hear a presentation from Sam or Chantel or me or Pete, and then just to go for a deferral, and then to have a similar presentation in a month's time. I think my question is to members in relation to Kingswood and Franklin. Are you happy that we just we go away and we do that research on those applications or those sites, as Councillor Hamilton said, in terms of the area, and research that and come back, that you will have sufficient information to determine those applications in a month's time or whatever? Okay. Okay, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Peake.
I'm not even sure if this is appropriate, but I think it would be kind to the public sitting there to explain what the process of going for deferment is, so they know what the heck is going on. Is that appropriate to explain?
Chair, I'm happy for that. Members effectively are not making a decision on these applications. Members feel that in terms of the HMO applications, they haven't got sufficient information to assess the applications against policy, particularly in relation to the proliferation of HMOs in the street and in the area. They've required me and my officers to go out and get that information and to come and for the applications to come back to a future planning meeting for consideration and determination.
Thank you. So, Councillor Nang.
I just want to ask this question. Has the council got the planning department, have you got any threshold that maybe within a radius of maybe 100 meters, there should be only 10% of HMOs in that area, or you don't have any such policy? Because going by saying 500 meters, if there is no such policy, how are we going to use the 500 meters? So we should know that maybe there is a policy that is saying that, okay, within a radius of 20 or 100 meters, there should be 10% HMOs, or there should be 2% HMOs. Do you have any such policy that we can stand on and use it?
Chair, we'll come back on that. I know other authorities have clearer guidance on this in relation to supplementary planning documents. We have what's set out in our existing local plan. It does talk about areas. What we will do is we will look at appeal decisions. We will look at other guidance on that, and we'll clarify that in our report. I think Pete wants to come in, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, if you want to come in, Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just picking up on Councillor Hamilton's point about the 500-metre radius, and I think it's really getting members' feel of that. Do members agree that that's a good, because we don't want to provide 500 and then 4 members say, actually, I wanted 600 or 700. So if we could get a consensus from committee, that would be useful.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton.
No. Well, I'm happy with 500-metre radius, which is a 1 kilometre diameter.
How about other members? Yeah, 1 kilometre. Yeah, we're happy with that. Thank you. Right.
So basically, it goes back to what you were about to do when I stopped you, and apologies, Chair. You were going to defer both applications.
Right, so is it, who wants to defer the next 2 applications? Raise your hand for deferral.
That's 13, Chair.
Okay, the agenda item 7 and 8 are now deferred as well. So we move on to agenda item 9, which is exclusion of the press and public. Is it agreed by members that the press and public are excluded from agenda item 10? Is that agreed? Thank you. So if public gallery can now leave the building so we can carry on with the committee, thank you.